This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. We record this live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 99, Wednesday, July 15th. Today we're going to talk about Drupal 8, the elephant. Welcome, guys.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Top of the afternoon.
Top of the day to you, my friends. So we're talking about Drupal 8 today, and we're talking about it with the usual cast and crew with one other one. We have John Picozzi from Oomph. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon.
So I was doing the math yesterday, and we saw each other Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 out of 5 days in a row. Are you sick of me yet?
Is that accurate? Well,
yes. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then Tuesday night.
Thursday night?
We were all together.
For the...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My days must just be running together. I don't remember. I will say it's always enjoyable when I see you, Steven. So you
cool.
have that going for you.
Yeah, and also we have Nick Laughlin. And other than the Friday night, it was Thursday night, Saturday night, and Tuesday night.
Yeah. So speaking of Saturday, we all went down to Newport or Portsmouth, Rhode Island, to see a polo match. So it was a high class evening with Talking Drupal and Talking Drupal alums. So it was a good time.
Couldn't have been too high class. They invited me.
I had fun.
They did let us in. I guess as long as you have $12, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, excepting the 40 minutes to go half a mile to get in, the night was great fun. So and then yesterday night, of course, was not Talking Drupal. Yesterday night was the Drupal meetup in Providence, so it was another good event.
Yeah, it was a good time. So we also have joining us today Tim Dickens. He's been with us in the past. Welcome, Tim.
Hello. I think this is my third time.
Is it your third time?
I think I'm at 3.
After 5, you get a free time.
Yeah, I get the 5-timers club.
So for those of you who do not know Tim, you might know him online as Trigonian. Don't know what that means, but that's his Twitter handle and how you'll probably see him on message boards. He's a front-end, I call front-end plus developer, which what I mean by plus is he does front-end and back-end and kind of anything that you throw at him. So he's been working for my company for 5 years. Prior to doing web development, he was a truck driver. So he's one of those guys who wanted to change things in his life, so put himself through school at night and changed his career completely. So, interesting story. Maybe someday he can tell you about it. So, welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
So, today we're talking about... Are you guys hearing an echo? I'm getting a bad echo from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo.
Don't know where it's coming from. Tim, could you mute yourself for 1 minute? And just, as we're talking here, I just want to see if it goes away. So, what was I saying? Okay, we're going to talk about Drupal 8. So it's interesting. So the week before we record the show, we always sit down the prior week and do some planning on upcoming shows and guests and things like that. And then we talk about the topic for the upcoming week. And we threw Drupal 8 on the table, and it turned into an hour-long kind of heated discussion between John, Nick, and I about Drupal 8. And it was just too bad we didn't hit record that day. So we're going to try to, I don't know if we're going to be able to rekindle the fire today, but we're going to chat about Drupal 8 again and see what people are thinking. And this is all around the concept of the perception that Drupal 8 is late and behind and what the impact of that is. And I use that word perception carefully. So let's start where
Do you remember where the question originally came from? I know you posed it, but the question was something along the lines: the delay in launch of Drupal 8 is beginning to affect the community.
Yeah, and that's how we started that discussion, and it's because I've been having some conversations with Drupal people like you guys do all the time, and I've gotten this sense over the past couple of months of frustration, disappointment, and confusion about what has taken so long and how that has impacted business and people's thinking about Drupal 8. And that's how our conversation started last week. So maybe let's start it there today. So, do you guys actually think that Drupal 8 is behind?
Well, yes and no. I mean, as you said, it's you have to say carefully. Is it officially behind? No, because there's never been an official release date posted, and it's always been handled it from official standpoints as when it's ready, it will come out. So when you go back to the question of is it late, you really can't you can't say it is. I think the question is, do we feel as a community maybe Drupal 8 should already be out, or the next version of Drupal should be out, maybe not Drupal 8 specifically. And I think that that's a very interesting position to take.
So I think after our conversation, I kind of found myself thinking about it off and on, leading up to today's show. And I think something that I kind of realize, and I feel that people that harp on the fact that Drupal 8 is late, which is quite rhymes quite nicely. The fact that people harp on that, say it's late or it's delayed or it should be out already, really in my mind is met with the fact that Drupal 8 is a huge rewrite to not only the Drupal system but also including a whole bunch of new features and functionality. It's not by any means an easy lift, and I think that's something that people tend to forget. When they're saying these things, or they're cursing the fact that Drupal 8 isn't here and ready to use.
And I think that's a good point. And I think it comes back to perception and how it was handled. Because, like I said, nobody officially ever gave a date when it should be out. However, if you look at some of the marketing materials around Drupal 8 and some of the discussion around Drupal 8, especially during DrupalCons in the past year and a half, while when people said when is it out, they definitely didn't give a date. They gave the impression that it was soon, trademark, and there was a real ramp up in information about Drupal 8, and there's really a lot of information out there that you want to, I think part of it is everybody's excited for Drupal 8. Drupal 8 has so many features packed in, and I remember you were talking about last week, John, about a white paper that you had read that talked about all the different features of Drupal 8, and you were, talking about how many different things you were, really looking forward to. And I think
that was kind of the catalyst of our conversation, because we were thinking of show ideas, and I said, hey, we should talk about Drupal 8. Because I read this white paper and I'm really excited about it, and then we went down this path. So,
well, here's a question. Now, like take Joomla for example. Joomla has a release schedule. I think it's like every 3 years or every 18 months. I forget exactly what it is. Has Drupal ever had a standard release cycle?
No, and their only scheduled release cycle is that they generally do. They do everything on Wednesday, and then generally updates to core are done in the first week of the month. Not always. I mean, depending on circumstances, it can be other days, other weeks, but it's always on a Wednesday. As far as saying every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years we'll have a new version, they've never made that statement. Although the plan is for versions after 8 to have a much more regular release schedule to put out. And that, that really, kind of circles back again to part of what what we were discussing. The question is, is the fact that it's taking so long causing problems for Drupal, the Drupal as a community? And we really started discussing, things like, well, Drupal 7, is there anything you can't do in Drupal 7 that you need to wait for Drupal 8? Is there a reason that people should not be building websites in Drupal 7 to wait for Drupal 8? And the answer at this moment is no. Drupal 8 is not ready, and Drupal 7 is very mature. Drupal 7 has tons of modules out there that allow you to configure and build very complex websites and applications. But on the other side of the coin, Drupal 7 now is 4.5, 5 years old, and as far as the maturity of the module base goes, because people were under the impression that Drupal 8 was just around the corner, a lot of modules have stopped being maintained. You'll see, you'll download a module and go to install it, and you'll see that it hasn't been updated since 2012.
And Nick, are you just making that leap there? That you kind of took two big leaps there. One was that modules. The first one was that it was right. People thought it was right around the corner. Okay, that's one leap. I mean, we'll all agree that we all thought it was coming sooner. I think. But the second is that you believe that people stopped updating Drupal 7 because of that.
Can I address the first leap there?
Yeah.
I think anybody that has been in the know has always, the argument has always been that Drupal will be released when it's ready. And this was part of our conversation last week, was that from Dries all the way down, everybody has said Drupal will be released when it's ready. And the goals have been well stated. Drupal, will go to beta when there are no more critical bugs, and Drupal will go to a release candidate when there are no more critical bugs. So the kind of timetable for this is almost driven by the community. I mean, you get involved, fix as many bugs as you can, so that way we can get to a release candidate faster. So to say that Drupal, Drupal will be out soon, or that there was some sort of timetable for a Drupal release is really, in my opinion, not a fair argument.
Well, if you say, but if you say, yes, Dries on down, nobody's ever given a specific date. But if you look at the community and how people thought about it, in December of 2013, episode 27, we made predictions on when we thought Drupal 8 would be out. And I believe most of our predictions were around June of the next year. And in February of 2014, we had Dries on the show, and he certainly was, going around on other podcasts as well as our own and talking about Drupal 8. And the main keynote of Austin, Bogota, Barcelona, and not Barcelona. Wait, was it Barcelona? Maybe Barcelona. Was about Drupal 8, and that certainly speaks to a ramp up in the community of getting people ready for that release, and then.
But are we misinterpreting that? Are we misinterpreting that as a ramp up to get ready for that release, or a ramp up to work on the release so we can get to a release? In my opinion, it's a ramp up that says we need more people to work on this because we're not getting to that goal that has been agreed upon, that we need to squash all of these bugs before we can get to a release candidate. So, in my mind, we could say how great Drupal 8 is going to be, and I have full confidence that it will be very, very awesome. but it really comes down to like getting the community involved to get through these bugs and to get to the promised land of a release candidate.
I think people ran into some frustration too a little bit during the beta process. It was always kind of understood, and again, I don't know if this is innuendo or perception, but it was always my understanding that it would not go to beta. When it came out in beta, that was the point that you could begin investing time in it because there'd be an update path every time a beta release came out, and that didn't happen. When the beta came out, you couldn't then take the next beta and just update it.
You still can.
Yeah,
that's one of the remaining critical issues.
Okay, so it kind of, I think that from where I sat, because as you know, I invested a lot of time. We were putting this additional program together called Exploring Drupal 8 that we were starting to look at things and dig into them, and then this thing where I couldn't update as betas were coming out. I couldn't update from beta to beta. I was losing my code. It became quite frustrating, which is one of the core reasons why I just put that thing on hold.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was at the point to actually ramp up, build momentum in learning and stuff, and then it was a bit of a frustrating experience.
And to speak to that, we're certainly getting closer. Where there's only 15 critical bugs, and if I can take a moment, I'd like to run through very quickly just to give you an idea of what they are. The first two are both cache related. Are both cache related. The next one is a performance thing. The next one is cache and performance. The next one is another performance thing. The fifth one is just updating automated tests. So it's critical, but it's not touching the other stuff. The next one is a security thing. Then there's two more security things, 3 performance issues, and then provide an upgrade path, and then provide a beta to beta and beta to release candidate upgrade path. So 2 of them are, and there's 2 that I skipped because they're fairly straightforward. So they're mostly performance related. There's, I think, 10 of the 15 are performance or caching related. 1 is upgrade related, and then there's a couple miscellaneous ones. So we're really in the stages of fine tuning it and getting it ready, to get out. But you can speak to how you thought about it. I can speak to how I thought about it. But I certainly got the impression from Drupal meetups and from camps and from listening to keynotes that we would have a release candidate, by the end of 2014. And we don't have that because it's not ready, and it's not a knock because knock on the people that are doing the work, because it certainly is a lot of work, and they're certainly investing a lot of time. The question isn't necessarily are they behind or are they causing. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't that an artificial perception? I mean, you just said that your perception was that you were going to have a release candidate by the end of 2014. And that was, I don't know that anybody ever promised that.
What's an artificial perception?
It's a perception that is artificially created.
No, but I don't know about that. I mean, I know many people. That might
be a little redundant now that I think about it. But anyway.
I mean, I spoke to many people at other meetups that thought that it would be out by now, be out, within at least in the last 6 months. It would be out by, I mean, in December of 2014, again, we made predictions, and your prediction was I think you predicted by LA, it would go live at LA, and we're still in beta. And it's not necessarily about people. It's just the question is it hurting the community that has taken so long? And I think that there were a few points that we discussed to be discussed around that. And one of them is what the public perception of was when it would come out. And I think the second one is the fact that Drupal 7 is now 4.5, 5 years old, causing the Drupal community to have difficulty when bidding on new projects. Are companies looking for Drupal 8? Are companies waiting for Drupal 8? Are companies questioning why they're using a version of Drupal that is 5 years old when Drupal 8's been spoken about for nearly 2 years now?
So I think some of the answers to those questions, and we do want to talk about those things, but I do think the perception has been changed in the last few days of that. with the announcement from Acquia this week, right? And the
Yep.
title is Acquia announces it's ready for Drupal 8. That was Andreas's blog, and I'm going to pull up the link is in our show notes. I'm just going to pull it up here. And the article basically says we're ready to roll, we're ready to deliver services. And I actually think I even read in here that they're ready to upgrade modules that need to be upgraded in order to deliver a Drupal 8 project.
Yep.
It
Yeah,
says,
I mean,
so I think what my perception of and what the public's perception was 7 days ago is probably different than maybe what it is today with this blog post.
yeah, I think it's time to start getting ready for Drupal 8 again.
And it's funny because this came out after we had already planned this show.
Yeah.
So let's ask the question: are your customers or people you're working with asking for work done in Drupal 8?
Yes. I have, and it's coming in a couple of different forms for me. I have one or two clients that have a Drupal 6 site. They're thinking that works for them. You know, it's starting to show its age. They're considering updating, and the question for them is: should I wait for Drupal 8 or should I go with Drupal 7? And if I go with Drupal 7 now, how long will that site be viable? If I wait a year and go with Drupal 8, how long will it be viable? The second type of client, and usually the easier type of client to deal with, is a client that is just looking for a new website and wants to use Drupal 8. And it's typically easier just to speak to them about it and say, well, Drupal 8's not, production ready. It's not even a release candidate. We should go with Drupal 7 and speak to them about the technology and why whether it's worth waiting for them or not. But it's a very different situation than talking about an upgrade.
Well, here's a question. Say tomorrow the release candidate comes out. Realistically, how long do you think we'll be looking before we have a solid, stable release? I mean, in your experience.
Well, it's a little bit different in this case, and I'll let the others give their opinion too. In Drupal 7, it was about 6 or 7 months, and that was mostly because of views. In this case, it's a little bit different because views is in core, and there's also it's more fully featured. It has entity, a full entity API. It has REST. It has some other stuff just in core that lends itself towards building websites. Then again, there's a bunch of smaller modules that need to be updated. But I imagine, when Drupal 8, the first release, comes out, I imagine 2 or 3 months before it's ready to start going.
So I think the part of the issue with that, or the question there, is once you say, hey, I'm going to try to build this in Drupal 8, you'll then discover the modules that are in your pack, your module pack of 150 things that you use on a regular basis or something. Which ones are those that you rely on that are converted to Drupal 8 and the ones that are not? And I think that could be the area that kind of slows you down. So you may have to be giving up some functionality or doing something a little different until those modules get updated, or you maybe find a different approach.
Yeah, and keep in mind, most of the really big modules, have like rules. Rules isn't in core, but rules will be probably ready on the day Drupal 8 is ready. Date, I don't recall if date's in core or not. It's been, like Steven said, we stopped looking at Drupal 8 a few months ago. But those kinds of modules, I'm not really concerned about. It's more like the the little tiny helper modules like module filter. Module filter is exceptionally useful, although it's not as necessary in Drupal 8 because Drupal 8 handles the module page a lot better. But it's those little modules that have maybe 5,000 or 10,000 installs. They're incredibly useful. You use them on every site, but they may not have the visibility of the community to be updated immediately.
And I think that actually goes back to what I was saying about how long till it's actual viable. I mean, it's one thing. Okay, yeah, sure, we have a Drupal core. I mean, how many sites out there are actually running on just the core? No modules from and no contrib modules whatsoever.
Nothing. No,
It's just
nothing. Yeah.
yeah, you don't see that a lot, and it's one of those. Yeah, sure. We've got a stable core, we've got rules, we've got all these other big time ones, but we've got so much other stuff that we can't touch yet. And it's one of those, how long after the release do we, do you think, just ballpark, we're going to have to wait before we can actually start getting in things and not have to reinventing the wheel?
Nick, I need a little bit of clarification from you. Are you suggesting that you would recommend to clients that are interested in building a site in Drupal 8 that they could start using the release candidate for their production sites?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay, all right. I was just curious because as I was listening to you, it sounded like that.
Yeah,
to me.
absolutely not.
Okay.
But I do have a client that I was bidding on that their requirement was that the site be in Drupal 8, and they were understood. It was clearly stated in the contract that it may not come out until January 2016 or January 2017, but they were adamant and certainly willing to pay for bringing some some core developers on to fix it. I mean, they were so they understood the ramifications, but yeah, I would certainly not recommend using a release candidate or be comfortable doing that either.
Okay.
So
How about you, John, with customers looking for Drupal 8?
So our stance right now is kind of a project by project basis, and it really depends on timeline. Not a lot of our clients are coming to us and asking for Drupal 8, and most of our clients are more concerned about timeline and getting the project completed. So in that case, we're recommending Drupal 7 because it is fully functional. It is the standard, and there is no real timeline. There's best guesses out there as to when Drupal 8 will be released, but we can't really work with those. So we're definitely going with Drupal 7 for the time being.
Well, I mean, even though Drupal 7's been out, what'd you say, 5-6 years? I mean, if we're only just now this close to getting our next release, Drupal 7's still going to be supported for a good long time frame. So the question is, we're at 5 or 6 years right now. I mean, are we looking at 10, 12, 15 years support just on Drupal 7 alone?
I mean, that's a good question. So we should look at the past really quick. In general, Drupal, I think Drupal 4.7 and Drupal 5 was a 2 or 3 year process. Drupal 5 to Drupal 6 was 2 or 3 years, and Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 I think was 3 years. This is by far the longest between releases and very much different. The plan is to go to a much faster development cycle. And that's one of the reasons why, as John said, there's such a big rewrite, towards object-oriented, more modern, coding practices to help allow iteration much quicker. Because, Drupal 8 is, Drupal 7, while very useful and can do anything, you're starting to, it is 4 or 5 years old. And in the web world, it's a very, very long time. Drupal 8, one of the main main points is that development of major releases will speed up much quicker. There's also been talk because of that to change the support pathway. So currently, the Drupal community and support, the security team, support the current release and the most recent old release. So Drupal 6 and Drupal 7. And when Drupal 8 comes out, it'll be Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. There's been some discussion about changing that to the current release and the last 2 releases when Drupal 9 comes out. So it'll be 7, 8, and 9. But then that cycle would speed up. So it wouldn't be 5-10 years. It might be 3 or 4. But we don't know. If Drupal 8 doesn't come out for another 2 years, then it's possible. But I don't really think it'll be that long.
How about preparing? Like, what is the time now? I mean, I sort of feel differently in a week about this now because the bug list has gone down a bit. All the stuff there seemed to be mostly performance-related things. I envision that there's been a lot of people like me who've cooled off on it a bit, and that they might be starting to get a little excited again and jump back in. So we may see that list start to go up in terms of bugs. So we may be on this with the Acquia announcement. We may see that climb a little bit over the next month. But what is the right time now? Is it again time to start to ramp back up?
So,
like, I'm about to go on vacation for a week. Should I? It's a perfect time for me to sit on a beach and play with Drupal 8. Am I wasting my time?
First of all, if you're sitting on a beach playing with Drupal 8, I don't think you fully understand the concept of a family vacation. Okay, that's just me.
I'm glad my wife isn't listening. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
We just saw the hand come flying in, slap, and then just disappear.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I'm not sure I could think of a more relaxing way to do Drupal 8.
I mean, my opinion, I think, as you said, we invested some time into it, and then, things sort of stagnated for a little while. I think I'm going to wait, unless I'm going to start looking at the critical issues again, seeing if there's anywhere I can insert myself. But that's, some of that stuff is a little bit above me. I'm going to most likely wait until a release candidate comes out.
I mean, I was thinking about that. It's like, John, you were mentioning, everybody get in here and let's get these bugs knocked out. Let's get this and everything. And, while I'm a Drupal developer, I am in no way on the level of some of these other guys that are working on this stuff. And to me, it almost seems like it's reached a point where there ain't nothing I can do. Because, how can you work the top of the pyramid when you're still trying to understand the bottom?
Tim, there's a big piece you're missing, is that we're talking about critical issues only. There's a boatload more of things that are all kinds of things, and there's even things you can work on that are like documentation.
Yeah. So
there's lots of ways to contribute.
To speak to that, there are currently 15 critical issues, 994 major issues, and 5,239 normal issues.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah. So there's certain. I think the way it's stated is we get a release candidate when critical issues are gone, and I think it releases when major issues are gone, or that might not be entirely correct. I don't recall. But a certain percentage of major issues need to be gone.
That's a lot of major issues.
Yeah, and I think some of the critical issues were just downgraded to major issues. So, and I know we've all done that. We've all been like, this isn't critical, this is low.
No. Well, where did that issue go? It was on the sprint last week. It's not there this week. What happened? We need to get the sprint done.
Yeah, no. So now, that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't, they probably were needed to be major issues. They're fairly responsible about that. But
are you accusing Dries in the late hours of the night sneaking into the?
Absolutely not. Although yesterday, at one point, this is where I started getting really excited again. Yesterday, the announcement came from Acquia, and then I looked at the Drupal releasedate.com site, and they showed that at one point yesterday there were 11 critical issues. It's back up to 15, so they've added a few. But there's been a lot of movement in the last 3 months. They've closed 29 critical issues, and this year we've closed 93. Now,
you know how many majors have been closed in the last?
Okay, today there have been 4 major issues closed. In the last year, there have been 373 created. So these are movement. So it's not necessarily. So we're probably more created and more closed.
Right.
It's a net, net movement.
Okay, so the net movement on majors over the past years is more, not less.
Yeah, there's 994, so a 50% increase over a year ago. Which is, both a byproduct of more people looking at it, and
Yeah.
and several other things. So I don't necessarily see that as a huge discouragement. It's more of a, something that just needs to be overcome.
So I was asking the question, when is it time to, other than a vacation in the beach, when is a good time to maybe start jumping into this again? It might not.
RC1,
RC1, huh?
I think, which according to the website is estimated to occur on August 19th.
That's a great
So,
day.
Next month, almost exactly.
That's my birthday.
Isn't that your birthday, Stephen?
I'm actually going to go with RC2. RC2 is going to be the best time to get into that, or 1.1, because then you'll be able to see if there's an upgrade path. That
Do you care to give another prediction? Our last two predictions have been off by.
That's what I was going to save that to the end, though. By the way.
Okay, we can save that.
you won't get a prediction out of me this time.
Come on, John.
My last predictions were foolhardy and uncalculated. So
Don't let that never let that stop you in the past.
yeah, I'm changing my tune. It's going to be ready when it's ready.
He had an artificial perception back then.
Yeah, no more artificial perceptions.
Exactly.
Um,
and we kind of already touched on this, but and what happens when it comes out? It's then that when we hit that, let's say you decide to jump in an RC 1 or 2. Then what are you gonna? How are you gonna do it? I mean, take a small, unimportant internal project. Do you hit those kinds of things first?
Yeah, I mean that I'll probably rebuild my website. My website's not terribly complex, but it does have multilingual, which there was a great talk yesterday at the meetup by John talking about lingotech and multilingual. So my site has that, very dead simple, but it's not necessarily run of the mill. So it'll give me a good chance to kind of test out some of that stuff, and then I'll likely approach a couple of my clients that are in Drupal 7 that have been there for a while, and I know their sites very, very well. For example, I got a client that I've had with Drupal 5, 6, and 7 now, so I'll approach her and discuss what the options are for upgrading. And again, it's a fairly straightforward site, so it's a really good candidate for that kind of thing. And I'll work from there, and then that probably. Once it's released, I'll probably start talking about Drupal 8 with some people and determine if they're willing to wait 2 months or add 2 months to the project and a small percentage to the budget in order to launch in Drupal 8. And some clients may think that that's a good decision. Some clients may want to get to the market quicker and just go with Drupal 7, understanding that it's only going to be supported for a few more years. But I just like with Drupal 7, I'll take it one project at a time. Build a couple of simple sites first, especially since everything is new, especially the theme. Starting with a simple site, so you can just focus on the theme and what Twig does and provides, and that kind of information will be really important.
So something I did with Drupal 7 actually, when Drupal 7 came out to a full release, is we had actually had this client that was bringing us a website that was, and I actually worked for a different company. This wasn't Oomph, but they brought us this really small website that was 5 or 6 pages and had a minimal feature set. And at the time, my boss was like, "Oh, we can't do that. If we build that in a content management system, it's gonna, their budget's only, X amount of money." I said, "Well, why don't we do it, and we'll do it in Drupal 7, and we'll charge them their amount of money, and the rest will be chalked up to, a learning experience. We'll be able to say we developed a Drupal 7 site, so on and so forth." And I would be inclined to take that same approach with Drupal 8, finding a small project where maybe funds aren't high and chalking a lot of it up to being a learning experience kind of benefits both sides. So that's definitely something I'm going to be kind of keeping my eye open for, those types of projects that might be interested in experimenting and getting something for a little bit cheaper than normal.
Yeah, I think if you're diving into something brand new like that, that's probably the best way, because the smaller it is, the less likely you are to need to depend on contributed modules or something else that's just not ready yet or not really there or hasn't even been attempted yet in that particular version. So, I mean, it helps you out in the long run.
That's definitely a good point.
I do think once the release candidate comes out, I do think it's going to, and even when the release candidate comes out, I do think it's going to be harder to talk to clients in a way for larger projects that they should be using Drupal 7. Because the larger the project is, the more money they're invested and the longer time they want to get out of that investment.
Yeah.
So I think that the larger projects are an area that we're going to have trouble when Drupal 8 comes out initially. And as it starts to get a little momentum, and you can still see that there's modules there that they need that isn't ready, and things like that, I think that's when those discussions are going to get a little bit more difficult.
But I also think that if you listen to our episode from 2 weeks ago, some of the tools that Drupal.org is implementing are certainly helpful towards that end. So if you have a bigger project, it opens the ability for the discussion to talk about, well, we need these modules in order for your site to work. Are you willing to help fund? Upgrading them from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8? And like Josh said, there's now tools to attribute particular commits and particular work to a particular organization. So you can say, hey, not only, in the past you kind of had to be like, well, you're using Drupal, maybe an altruistic, type sense of giving back. But in this case, you can say, your corporation XYZ, if you give us an additional X amount in the budget, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, we can attribute these upgrades to your corporation. So if somebody Googles you, it'll show up that you are helping contribute to the Drupal project. And I think that that's actually one of the more interesting things that came out of the conversation last week, 2 weeks ago with Josh, in that that ability gives me tools as a developer to work with my clients to help the Drupal community. I have some clients that are willing to let me share code, some clients that are fairly strict about it. So anything that I can use as a way to convince them to contribute back is helpful.
All right. I think we're heading to the wrap-up phase of this conversation. So I feel differently a week later after our first conversation about this last week. I mean, it's interesting how how a week could change stuff quickly.
Yeah, it's a lot calmer.
Yeah, we were all fired up last week. It's funny. And John never said business decision either.
Yeah.
So let's do predictions. Come on, John. What the hell? This is just a good time. So let's go for the prediction of release candidate 1.
August 31st, by August 31st.
Okay.
When is DrupalCon Barcelona?
September, is it? I don't know. What was the DrupalCon last year that wasn't Barcelona? Amsterdam. That's what it was. Barcelona is...
Just Nick, just to put things in context, you're saying 6 weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
Early bird ended in July 10th.
How about you, John?
I would probably say by DrupalCon Barcelona, whenever that happens to be.
21st of September.
Okay. About a month. So we got September 21st. Are you in on this one, Tim?
Oh, I'm totally in. I'm going back to what you said earlier because, truth be told, I don't know. So I have no context, so I'm going to go with August 19th. It's a good day. So I'm just going to go August 19th. And if we're going to go a little earlier, we'll go 4 days earlier, August 15th. So I'll say between the 15th and the 19th, somewhere between our birthdays.
4 weeks from today.
That's right.
Yep.
That'll work.
All right.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. I'm going October 10th.
Okay. And I think Drupal 8 as a whole will be out within 6 months of the release candidate, unless the criteria is all major issues need to be gone. Then I'm going to go with the year.
Another year. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big list. All right. Let's go on to our module of the week. And Tim has recommended the Bean module.
Bean.
Has anyone heard about Bean?
I've heard of it, but I've never used it. And I think I heard of it from Tim.
Okay, so Tim, I have no idea what this is. So tell us.
Man, well, first off, the shout out goes out to it's either Moses or Moises. I don't know what his name. I don't know how to pronounce his name because I never actually spoke to him. But he actually brought it up to me one day, and I had heard of it, but I had never looked at it. And it's weird. There are sometimes you need you'll create nodes, you'll use them with the intention of never actually accessing the node page. Maybe you've got, some type of node reference or whatever, but they're quite often in a site will use nodes with no intention of that node page ever being accessed. Well, my understanding is you can use Bean for that, which Bean stands for block entities aren't nodes. So you go in and you define like a block layout, which is the same thing as defining a content type. And then you go in and you create a piece of content off of that type, which is the same thing as making a node. You're making a block. And then I think the difference here is at that point you have blocks that can be placed into context, the blocks page and everything like that. I mean, the downside is, if you're creating something based off of nodes, you create a node, it'll just you don't have to worry about it. If you got a view that's showing nodes, you create a new node, it's going to potentially show that view if it fits the filter criteria. The difference is with Beans, you're creating blocks. So if you're going to create, a page banner as a block for all your different sites, every time you create a new one, say you got 1,000 of them you have to create for 1,000 pages, you have to place each individual block. Tedious at most. But it's interesting because I think that there is good value with it somewhere. I just ain't figured out what it is yet.
So I was going to ask you what your use case is for this.
I've been trying to figure it out. Really, it's one of those. It's everything about it tells me, man, this is pretty cool. This has got value in it, and it's like every time I think about it, and it's like, where? And so I really can't think of one.
So I think what it is, after reading the module page, I thought it was one that you were actually using. I think it just makes blocks entities, so that you can create a block type, create a specific instance of that block, and then you can use, rather than having to create views or something, you can use context to place that block somewhere. It's probably good for the situation where, for example, you have a footer block, and you want the contact information in there, and you want the user to be able to edit it, but you don't want to give them access to the block overview page. I would imagine what that's for. I'm not entirely sure.
So this has been addressed in Drupal 8, by the way.
Yeah, blocks are entities now.
Yeah. Like everything's entities now, basically. Right. But it's just one of those. It's like every time I come across maybe it can be used to do this. I can do the exact same thing with nodes and views. So I really just think it's just the exact same thing bundled differently with a different functionality. But to me, I mean, that the need to have to place the block someplace is just that's a heavy weight to have to do every single time. Every time you create something, you have to specifically go place that block. So
yeah, but like I said, I think it's for something like probably contact information. You would you might put a sidebar contact information or something like that, and then the user can edit that information without having to worry about using the block.
Mm-hmm.
So just so a little context here, it's a commonly used. It's got over 16,000 installs, so it's being used. I mean, it's not one of the heaviest modules out there, but it's definitely being used. It is marked as maintaining fixes only. And Tim, you will not be the first person who has talked about a module of the week and has never used it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was hoping that y'all knew something about it because, like I said, I've been trying to find a reason, a use case to use this, and it's one of those I have yet to find one that it just solves better than anything else. And I was hoping y'all would.
I can try it, and it's maintenance fixes only, but it was updated in March, so it's been updated newer than most.
So along the update line, I got a question about this, and I know I'm breaking protocol here, but do you think with Drupal 8 that the frequency and the release of modules will be better? Something that we constantly harp on is the fact that modules are, the actual releases are 2 years old. The dev releases are 6 months old, and nobody's updating one from the other. Do you think Drupal 8 will resolve that, or do you think it's just going to be much more of the same?
I mean, it will be the same as Drupal 7. There'll be a huge uptick of new modules and updated modules and that kind of stuff, and then it will plateau for a little while, and then popular modules will continue to get updated, and less popular modules will, not be updated for a while. But again, with the plan of, Drupal 9, coming out maybe a year or 2 years after Drupal 8, or, hopefully.
Here you go again.
Hopefully, no. I mean, there's been discussion that the plan is to increase the upgrade path. One of the reasons why they're moving to this is to bring more developers in and increase the work, the speed of releases. And if that is the case, then hopefully it will be better handled.
But there's nothing inherent in the technology or the development strategy in Drupal 8 that is changing anything to make this easier necessarily, or quicker or better. It's really about the developer's commitment to keeping the module updated.
Yep.
Very interesting. Okay. So I think we're going to call this a wrap. So John, where can people find you online if they'd like to talk to you personally, or maybe reach out to Oomph for some development work or design work?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi. And you can actually find me always on at the newly designed oomphinc.com.
That's right, the new website is live.
It is live. Went live on Independence Day.
Saw that. And how about you, Nick?
You can find me online at NixVan pretty much everywhere on Twitter, and send me a tweet.
Great. And thank you for joining us again, Tim. And where can people reach out to you? You have to unmute yourself first, though.
I mean, you can technically find me on Twitter, but unless you actually send me something, and chances are I'm not going to look at it. I just don't hang out on Twitter that much. So you can find me on Twitter at Trigonian, or you can just find me at the Parallax Infotech website.
Excellent. And same for me, Stephen Cross. Visit parallaxinfotech.com to learn more about our company. I can be reached on Twitter. I do get on there frequently at Stephen Cross with a PH. And our next show is 100, and we have Jason Palmental joining us that day. We haven't picked a show topic yet, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. It'll be nice to have him back.
Big 100.
We're gonna play the Welcome Back Carter theme song.
Okay, here we go. All right, guys, take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a
All
good
right.
one, guys.